Like, what is happening here? And they had two attorneys. I'm pro se. Well, their attorney stood up and said, Your Honor, we know we have to continue this into next week. They knew he wasn't doing well on the stand. And he's like, we know that you forgot to block off the day, so let's continue this into next. So we get into court the next week, and they say, Your Honor, we know Christine, she's, crossing her ex. We need to call a witness to the stand because we need to get back to work. And I'm like, who is this? And it's Damian Titus, the CPS investigator. And essentially, he takes the stand and lies and it insinuates that he's met with my son, never met with him. My ex and his wife would not allow him to meet with my son. And he threw his entire case out. Mind you, I'm sitting there watching this man lie. And I am just are you kidding me right now? And at that point, you could see the judge go, okay, she's crazy. I don't believe a word that she says. And after that, it was like downhill for me. She granted the protective order. He granted the temporary orders for supervised visits. And it was just downhill. I continued to go all the way to the DOJ with Damian. And he's no longer employed with CPS. He was not a good investigator.
So to pause, so people who don't know, Damian was the CPS worker that lied on the stand.
Correct. And he was the one that essentially did not meet with my son and threw his case out because my ex and his wife did not allow him to. And the reason being because they were prepared for him because they knew because of Mary. So they were 100 steps ahead of anything. So when Damian came to the house, they said, these allegations have been ruled out before. She's made this up, all the things. She's so crazy. And so when I called Damian and asked him, how the visit went, he was like, well, they didn't let me in. And I was like, okay, throw the case out. And I was like, why would you do that without meeting with my son? He's like, well, hasn't this been alleged before? And I said, you cannot make a statement like this without meeting with me. My son had an infection at one point and had to go to the doctor. Have you reviewed any of that stuff? Have you seen any of that stuff? Like, there is history, yes, behind it. But until you make a decision that what I'm saying or what is going on is not true. And I said, and if I'm so crazy, if I coerced him, if I did all of these things, better yet, meet with him, right? Because aren't you trained to see if I coerced him, if he made it up? And I told my ex-husband the same thing. I said, if I'm so crazy, let him meet with him. And they wouldn't. And here's the thing. I tried to get this CPS report for several months. I could not get this report. I did not get this report until 2 months ago. I get this report. And it is alleged in this report that my son was regressing, going to the bathroom in his pants, because it came from his counselor at school, that he was depressed, that he was sad, that there were red flags all day long from the teacher and the counselor. Damian writes this in his report, but he also writes they're in a custody battle, blah, blah, blah. Like, essentially, is trying to bolster his report to validate why he's throwing the case out, if that makes sense. Even though, right, he was living with them full time. They had majority of custody. Why was he regressing? He should have been thriving, right? He should have been doing so much better if he was taken from his mom. And I didn't even know this was happening. Nobody told me. My ex and his wife didn't tell me this. The teachers didn't tell me this. And I only had him on weekends, so I had no idea that this was going on until 2 months ago. And that's when I found out that Mary was a collateral in their CPS report. They used nobody from our family. They used no friends that have known us for years. They used Mary Habel and one of my ex's wife's friends as collateral. And Damian didn't question that. Like, do you have any family that has history? I mean, I even have an aunt that I don't get along with. They could have used her. Why are we using these people? And so anyways, this report, when I tell y'all, infuriated me. Because why it was thrown out, it never should have been, number one. And number two, why on earth are we allowing collaterals for a child that do not even know the child personally or the mother. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But yes, Damien has reached out to me and said, you know, I've got these pictures of him doing drugs. He's been arrested several times for felonies, assault, choking, domestic violence. This man was employed with CPS for 15 years. 15 years. And he no longer, thankfully, has a job. But she said, because she was with him at the time, and she said, I remember the day of your case. He came home and said, I'm going to make sure this bee loses her kids, because she called my supervisor. I called his supervisor because he told me he was going to throw out the case. And so he sure did. I mean, he took the stand and you know, made that decision. But I wrote all the way up to the DOJ, and I do know he's no longer employed. Over and over, they know who I dated. They know what I did in my spare time, which, okay, if you're going to stalk me because you're concerned about my children, only stalk me when I have my kids, right? I mean, like, let's at least do that. You don't get to know who I date. You don't get to know what I do. You don't get to know what I eat for dinner or where I'm going, but they did. And the problem is their whole story is that Mary had been friends with me, and then a month before they filed the ex parte, Mary reached out to them because she was so concerned with my mental health. Which is a complete and utter lie, and I've got all of our text messages for that entire month. Mary was sending me my ex's wife's TikToks where she's like, we're going back to court, we're this. And when I tell y'all, I was having the worst panic attacks because I was threatened every other day with, we're going back to court, we're doing this. And I couldn't figure out our kids based on what this woman reported back to you and your wife is wrong. And we need to get together and know what's true and what's not. I don't even know what I've been accused of, because oftentimes I would just get messages, we know what you did. We know what you did. You know what you did. And I'd be like, what the heck did I do? And it got to a point to where I couldn't even check the messages anymore because I would literally have like a complete breakdown. And it's insane. And there's really not a lot I can do because I've got this criminal case on my back. I did have an attorney. I initially retained an attorney, and he called me and he said, Christina, I've never seen anything like this before. I've been an assistant district attorney and I've been a criminal defense attorney, and I've never seen anything like this before. He said, what it looks like to me is your ex and his wife continue to go up to the police so much that it annoyed them. And they were like, okay, here, we're going to do this. And he said, you know, if this has to go to trial, I will take this for free. So I put down the retainer, and then I was to give like $2,000 a month up to $10,000 to prepare in case we did go to trial. And I had gotten this call a couple months ago from the law firm saying, you violated your protective order again. And I was like, what the heck? Like, what did I do? Mind you, I've never been around these people. I've never done anything. And I get the police report, and my ex's wife made another false police report stating that I posted a picture of my son, who is a protected party. My son is not a protected party in her protective order. So anyway, I get this call from this attorney, and I'm having a conversation with her. She's really rude. And I said, where's Josh? Like, where's my attorney? And she's like, Josh left the firm. And I was like, what? I said, we have court tomorrow based on a police report with false allegations again. You don't know who the protected parties are. You don't even know the amount of police reports that have been filed. You know nothing about my case. I said, you need to file a motion to lift this warrant, and you need to reiterate the number of reports that have been filed in this case and what is going on. We get into court the next day. She comes out, she's like, great news, I got you a deal, 2 years deferred adjudication and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I cannot take this deal. You did a TikTok saying she was going off me, which I never did, or she did this. And so there were just these multitude of reports, but she couldn't get one in that arena. So then she filed it in civil court with an attorney. And then the rest was history. And literally the exhibits that she used were text messages and TikToks that Mary created and gave to her. I couldn't establish that in court because, first of all, I was in shock. But when I filed my motion to dismiss, I was like, once again, I'm like, that's it. They're not going to get away with this. Got my motion to dismiss. I've got my phone records. This is all going to blow up on them now. Like, watch out. No, their attorney got up and argued all this nonsense that my motion shouldn't be heard and she wouldn't have the hearing. I left that courtroom, and before I could even walk out, I had Mary emailing me laughing faces, like, haha. That means my ex's wife texted her in court like she didn't get her hearing. And they're like loving life that, you know, they're getting away with this. And I'm thinking, how did that just happen? How on earth did that just happen? I mean, how is anybody supposed to get their evidence and their truth in when you're not allowing it? Like, it's inhumane.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with the protective order being, we need to take them seriously. We need to do all the things, but we need to take them as seriously granting them. Because if we are granting them, especially to our abusers, we're playing with fire. Because they will use them as swords and not shields. They will use them for the wrong reasons. And we're playing with fire once we start doing things like that.
I think the biggest thing for me on that topic is really the lack of education on domestic violence, because there's so many times that, like, let's say somebody calls the police officer in a dispute and they show up and they're actually arresting the victim. And they're not looking at the root of, like, okay, well, was there financial abuse? Or were they in your face and you put your hands out and they're saying that you assaulted them, so now you're arrested? There's so many situations where I've had people call me and, you know, say like, oh, I was arrested for this, but they did this to me, but the police officers don't want to hear it. So I think it's just not only the police officers need more education on domestic violence, like even more so the silent forms of abuse, but also family court. Like there's a lot of guardian ad litems, amicus attorney, minors counsel, CPS, just about everybody in the family court system needs to be more educated on domestic violence, especially that silent form of abuse, the coercive control. And then I think that would also affect the protective orders, right? Because there are so many people that get false restraining orders. You're not the first one that I've heard of. There, you know, I've heard of so many, especially moms, that have had these false protective orders placed against them as a weapon, as to take the kids away, all while most of the time the person who
giving the protective order to the person that doesn't need it. You know, right. I needed the protective order. My children needed the protective order. And here's the other thing. If you're so scared where you're filing 36 police reports with the police saying that I toilet papered your house and I shot up your car with a BB gun, wouldn't you go get a Ring camera? Like, I don't know. I've got one, you know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me that you're alleging these things and it's nonsensical. But they're granting protective orders to the wrong people and they're not giving them to the ones that actually need it. And in my opinion, I don't believe that my ex's wife needs to be around my son because of the allegations that were made and the things that transpired and the way that they transpired. My son was not protected, but it wasn't for the puppeteer.
Yeah.
Like, she had access to things that she shouldn't have, and bringing back the information, you know, they were the puppeteers. They were the, you know, nemesis behind what this woman was doing and how she was able to do it.
I want to go back to something that you said, because I think a lot of people feel this way and are afraid to say it, is that they start feeling crazy, right? Is that it's a whole psychological warfare where first you get this like, okay, I'm going to escape. I'm going to physically escape. You have your plan. And then things happen, whether it is third parties, whether it is the abuser themselves or whoever it is continuing and continuing. And whether there's devices on your car or on your phone or in your emails or whatever it is. I see this all the time where you're like, how do they know this? And then you start thinking like, I'm crazy. Like, oh, they're like, I'm doing this, or they start gaslighting you. So you're like, okay, that makes sense. Like maybe it is me. Maybe it is this. And I think that they actually do make people crazy. The other night when I was on a live, I actually said that I believe part of like Britney Spears' story is very similar to that, where they fed off of this like postpartum stage. And whether you're actually diagnosed with postpartum or you leave and then it's years after you have a baby and they're like, oh my God, she has postpartum. That is something that consistently happens to women. And I feel that we're still in a society where they're like, oh my God, postpartum. Yep, nope, take the kids. And you're like, but I was a primary caretaker for years and you had no problem until I left or until you found a new partner. And now I'm crazy. And they feed off of that. They take your kids that you, that's your life, right? Like you were, whether it was a stay-at-home mom or you juggled work and the kids, and they take that and then play on your feelings and your stability. And then again, back to the like, how would they know these things? And for you, it was this woman that you thought was your friend. So then you're like, well, who else is turning on me? And then you start feeling like, okay, do I shut off everybody, or is it somebody else, or is somebody lying on somebody else? And then it feels like you are going crazy. And then they take that and say, told you she's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's very much like that for a lot of these cases.
Yeah. No, I did. I felt like I was going crazy, and it wasn't until Tara told me, by the way, Mary's not your friend. She's working with your ex's wife, that I was like, what? What? Are you kidding me? Like, I couldn't believe that. I was like, why would you take my son's private words, his outcry that he gave to his mom, that I was too scared to report, that I was too scared because I didn't know what to do because they were so contentious. And you took that and you gave it to them. That is like insane. These are children. I don't care whether you think, whatever you think, when I would send what he was saying to me to her, I'd be like, well, what do you think about that? What am I, and she'd be like, kids don't make that stuff up. You should tell his counselor, right? So you've got her text messages completely the opposite of what she gave in that CPS report. She gave in that CPS report that I coached my son, that I did all these things. Well, yeah, I've got 2 years of text messages of complete opposite of what that is. And, for her to say, oh, I came out and told the truth about Christina after 2 years. I'm sorry, but if I'm friends with somebody and you're harming your kids, you're doing bad things, we're not friends anymore. I'm not going to stay friends with you, and then all of a sudden after 2 years, like just out everything that you did. I'm out on the first time that I know you're friends with, and I'm going to be like calling the police, or I'm going to do, the appropriate channels. No. You were never my friend. You were there from the beginning, and you were stalked. I mean, you were used to stalk me, and that was your job. And she would get off on it because I would be crying and having these breakdowns from being accused of these things. And then she would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're doing this to you. And she would be like crying on the phone with me, like, oh my gosh, how did they know that? Like, why would this happen? Like, she would cause fights between my oldest son and I by telling them things when my oldest son and I were getting along. And then we'd end up in this argument, and I would think it was my son telling my ex and his wife these things. It wasn't my son. It was Mary. And the whole time I'm just sitting there like literally breaking down every other week because I can't figure out why these children that I've had this relationship with my decade and a half is falling apart. And why are they saying these things? Like, why would they, I don't want to give his personal information away, but why would, he do that? And it was never him. It was never him. Their privacy was taken and given to them. And no matter how you look at it, did they, have something in my house? No, they had somebody stalking. And there's no difference between planting things in my house than using a third party to bring back information to you. Stalking. And this is a criminal, thing. And honestly, these people need to face prosecution, in my opinion. You cannot stalk people. Like, this is against the law, and especially in this manner.